Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you so much for joining in. So, so a key part of the Buddhist path, and specifically of the Pure Land path, is to awaken the aspiration for Buddhahood. Now, on the one hand, it's kind of easy to be like, yeah, I want to be a Buddha. I want to be liberated from all suffering. And um, it's another thing to make it the most important thing in our life. So, one way to do that is to meditate on suffering. And I was out for a walk today, enjoying the beautiful day, looking at all the beautiful houses, meditating on suffering. And really, what came to me is that we really have a sense of denial about how bad life is and how bad the cycles of samsara are. Just on the street I live on, um, there's been a lot of suffering. But I don't think about that as I go about my day. And of course, my own, I've had so much suffering. But as soon as I have a good day, then I'm like, oh, life is great. I want to live forever. Life is fantastic. So there's this way in really reflecting on how much we've suffered in our lifetime, how much other people have suffered, to really help us see clearly that um, birth, death, rebirth, cycles of samsara, that life fundamentally is unsatisfying. That was the Buddha's final analysis. Um, so, all of this is so important because until we're seeking Buddhahood, we're seeking out in the world, right? We're seeking people, places, things. Until we really begin to seek for and yearn for Buddhahood, then it's like we're seeking peace and happiness where it can't be found in the world. And that's not to say that we can't have moments of happiness. Like I've had a really happy day. So, but what on really any spiritual path, and especially in the Buddhist path, what we're seeking is eternal peace, eternal bliss or happiness. Not happiness in the human sense of the word, that's like a roller coaster, but just mm, that deep joy of being that we'll never have as long as we're seeking in the world. So, and as long until we're with and seeking in the world is just another way of saying attachment, aversion, delusion, ignorance, right? So it's just another way of saying until we're Buddhas, until we are completely clear of attachment, aversion, of ignorance, of delusion, um, then life is going to be primarily suffering. And again, it can be tricky because one lifetime might not be so suffering full, but we need to look at the big picture that this is cycles of rebirth. And once we see the sheer amount of suffering that goes on, then and once we're open to the idea of Buddhahood, then that can awaken our aspiration. And then as Pure Land Buddhists, then that can very specifically awaken our aspiration for rebirth or birth in the Pure Land to end this truly vicious cycle. That's I don't know if the Buddha ever used the word vicious, but I believe that's basically what he discovered, that this cycle we're caught in is actually very vicious and very sneaky, because we're only aware of the suffering in this that occurs in this lifetime, and we're in just constant denial about how much suffering there is, how pervasive suffering there, and in denial of old age, sickness, and death. That's the one thing that we can count on in this life. So we want to um, awaken our aspiration to Buddhahood so that we can mm, count on the eternal, because nothing around us here is reliable and is going to make us happy. That's part of the illusion. That's part of the delusion. Is temporary happiness seems to occur here. But then, as I've been awakening my aspiration Buddhahood, then it's so life becomes so different. Like it's really strong right now, and may it continue to be strong. Um, because then, I'm not looking to the world for my happiness, and I find myself even more available to engage and participate in healthy ways, but in less and less attached ways. And I find, specifically as a Pure Land Buddhist, as I meditate on Amitabha Buddha and entrust myself to him and really begin to trust that I'm going to be reborn in the Pure Land, there's such a joy. There's such a joy that, the promise of eternal happiness, that nothing in this world can, what in this world can promise eternal happiness and actually deliver it. There are many things that can sort of offer a sales pitch like, "Oh, this will give you eternal happiness." They won't actually use those words, but like, "Oh, this'll do it." You know, "This will give you eternal happiness." But that's what we're really after. Never-ending peace, never-ending bliss. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you so much for joining in. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, it's very welcome. And I wish you beautiful reflections on suffering and 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 from that an awakening to a desire to the end of suffering and the beginning of eternal bliss and happiness.